A code violation caught an Austin business owner by surprise a year after she bought her property. She learned the previous owner did not complete work up to code, and she had no idea until she faced thousands of dollars in fines.
On this week's episode of Inside the Investigations, reporter Grace Reeder found out this is happening more and more often in Austin. So she asked what city leaders are doing to fix the problem.
And a good morning to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. Will Dupree coming to you from the KXAN Live studio for another edition of Inside the Investigations. This is where we take a behind-the-scenes look and a deeper dive into one of the stories that our investigative team has reported out in the last week. And the one we're talking about today almost made me go, wow, after reading it and also seeing it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Right now I'm joined here by our co-host for Inside the Investigations, investigative reporter Kelly Wiley. Kelly, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, as I mentioned, this is one story where you think, wow, you hope that you would never have to deal with the situation that we're going to discuss today. And the reporter behind that story is Grace Reeder, and she is joining us here in studio as well. Grace, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Grace, part of your story talks about yet another thing homeowners have to worry about. But let's back up to the very beginning. Tell us how you found out about this. Did you get a tip? Tell us why you started looking into it.
Absolutely. This is one of those cases where we're going to say, reach out to us on Report It because it can make a difference. This was one of those cases. This South Austin business owner reached out to us via Report It, and it was a really interesting story that she sent over to us, so we started to dig into it. I went over to her shop in South Austin. They have been in business in Austin in several different buildings for more than 30 years, and so her story was very interesting. She said during the pandemic they were unable to afford the building that they were at on South Lamar, so they moved to this location in South Austin, and a year after purchasing this building, they found out that it had active code violations on it, and very expensive code violations. Someone had built a room, and it doesn't meet setback requirements, so the city wants them to move that wall in 6 to 8 inches, which is going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars. They have already spent tens of thousands of dollars in this process just through consultants and site plans and working with the city to try to figure out what happened here.
And Grace, what happens if they, can't find this money? What happens if they don't do this work?
Well, frankly, they talked about losing their business. This is going to be a very costly process and experience for them. Thankfully, so far, they've been able to dish out the tens of thousands of dollars required to take the steps that they've taken so far. But she did say if this goes on much longer, if it costs that much more money, that they may not be able to continue.
When you took this problem, though, and identified what this woman has been experiencing to the city itself and the code department officials, what did they tell you? Because what you reported, it was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me, too. So the Development Services Department, which oversees those code officers who show up and issue those violations, talked to me on several occasions, both, kind of on background and also what you saw in this story. And so we did a lot of back and forth. And frankly, what they said to me, this code supervisor that I spoke to has been doing this for decades, and he said that they are seeing this, quote, more and more. And that surprised me because when you're seeing something more and more, it seems like that should be something that you should find a solution for. And so that's what we asked them. Is there a solution to this? And the city really pointed at the state and said that this is probably a state issue and that they are not seeking out a solution, even though they're seeing this problem more and more.
And you say they're seeing this problem. Tell us exactly what the problem they believe is, what they've pinpointed as why this happens so often.
Yeah, they say that it's frankly because more people are moving into Austin, so you're having a lot more, basically what they said is they're seeing people try to, make places more incentivized. They're trying to make places better, and so they're doing work without getting the proper permits and without it being up to code. And as people move in and out of Austin more frequently, that's what they're pointing to and saying that, a lot of these developers and folks who are flipping houses are doing this work without going through the proper steps because they're flipping those houses so frequently as folks move into Austin.
And of course, we've reported about some of the, hesitations and issues and headaches that people have had about working with code because of how long it takes. So perhaps this is a consequence of that in some ways. But as you were also reporting, Grace, tell us about what you did next, because I know you spoke to some of the city council members who could affect change in this regard.
That's right. So this business is in District 5. That's Councilmember Ryan Alter's district. And this family had spoken to Ryan Alter previously. They went to the council member and asked what he could do. When they went to him, they were trying to get that code violation to be wiped away. And there's a state law that does not allow Councilmember Ryan Alter to basically just do away with that violation and allow them to keep the unpermitted room that was built on. But we went back to Councilmember Alter because after this family learned that, there's not really a lot that they can do after the fact aside from sue, their attorney, or rather their real estate agent and these sellers. They now just want people to not end up in the same situation as them. So, we took that to Councilmember Alter and said, is there something more that can be done? And he agreed that there is. And so right now the city council is working on budget in their first meeting back from summer break. So they're really busy during the summer because of that. But he said that this fall he wants to take that next step to push the city to look for solutions, whether that be through the Austin Board of Realtors, whether that be going through some county records and making them more robust so it's easier to find these violations. He wants the city to do a better job of seeking out some of those solutions, regardless of where the solution is.
In your story title, no incentive in Austin to disclose the code violations, it sounds like part of the problem is what you mentioned, which is there are more and more people flipping houses, trying to make these houses desirable to potential buyers. But it sounds like your story really gets at that there's no incentive for them to actually tell them about these code violations or things that they have, that they're maybe just not telling the buyer that information. Is that kind of what's happening here?
Right. And so we really focused at the city level with this story. And so there is no city incentive, and that's what the Development Services Department told me verbatim. There is no city incentive for those sellers to disclose active code violations to potential or people who are actively buying a property. There's some stuff that comes after the fact with some of those disclosure agreements and such, and so there's some legal action that can be taken after the fact against different parties. But this woman really said that these are city code violations. She would like the city, as they are seeing this problem become more and more of a problem, to do a better job of educating people about the resources they have to look for some of these active violations, and to really put an incentive in place to figure out a way to incentivize these sellers to do the right thing and to notify buyers of those active violations.
Right. It is almost a solution hiding right in front of your face. If you don't know that you can look these things up ahead of time, why would you think to do it? And I love that part of your story where you kind of show there is some, if you're, for this woman, obviously it's much too late, unfortunately, but for people who are potentially buying, the simple solution might be just to get online and do some of this research to see.
Absolutely, and I want to point that out because that was something that the Development Services Department really wanted us to get across, is that they do have resources for buyers to look. It's really on the buyers to make sure that the sellers are not hiding something from them, and the real estate agents of those buyers to do that. And so there are resources on the city's website. We have those linked over for you in our story over on KXAN.com. So if you are looking at a property, that's something that those code folks really said was what buyers need to do, is go look over at those resources and make sure that there aren't any of these hidden violations.
Since your story came out and it aired in our newscast and was up on our website, you've had quite a few people reacting to it, including some real estate professionals here in the city. What has been that reaction?
Folks have sort of a different idea of who this woman should go after, and so it's interesting that I've heard from various real estate agents, whether they be friends or folks in the community, who have said, she should really, pursue her real estate agent. We really need to be looking at those violations. I've heard others say, I think that she needs to sue this buyer and go through her disclosure agreement, and yes, those are all steps that she can take, but, when I went and spoke to her and took some of those things to her, she said that's another very expensive process. That's another tens of thousands of dollars to spend on this ordeal, and it still wouldn't get them any closer to fixing their code violation. And so she would really like the city, because these are city code violations, to do something to make sure that this doesn't happen beforehand to other people.
It's so interesting that the city wouldn't be pursuing the person who owned the home when they didn't get the permit to do this work. That's interesting to me, that it's still falling on the current owner of the home.
Well, and that's something that we talked with them about. Kelly, I think it makes more sense than it might seem on the surface. You can't go after someone who doesn't have the authority to fix a violation. And so when someone takes on a home, they are now the person who can actually fix what is wrong. And those code violations are intended to keep people safe, to make sure that properties, are structurally sound. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense, frankly, to go after the previous homeowner, because they can't enact the change to make that property safe and make it up to code.
It's less about a penalty and more about fixing the problem.
Exactly.
Got it. Grace, this is great reporting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. If there's going to be movement on the state level, have you sent your reporting to any state lawmakers as they're kind of preparing for what they want to start looking at during the legislative session?
We have not done that yet. This was a story that we did as a day turn last week, and so you know how it goes with day turns, it's on to the next, but this is something we will be following. And we had this family reach out to us after the fact and say, how do we make sure that the city really does look at this and we follow these stories through? This is something that we'll continue to check in with city council members, and as we get into the fall, making sure that we are following this story to fruition. As you all know, I'm the city reporter, and so we have good relationships with our city folks, and we'll continue to follow this at the city level.
All right, I think we will leave it there. You can check out Grace Reeder's story on our website at KXAN.com. Please, there's a lot of depth there and some resources, as she mentioned, if you are experiencing this very same problem. Also, if you are, reach out to us. We would love to look into that too. Grace, once again, thank you for being here. We do appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that is this week's episode of Inside the Investigations. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me as well. I do appreciate that too.
I know this has been a very interesting story. I feel like are we millennials? We're
right.
People trying to buy homes. So this was very, very interesting to hear about.
Very revealing for sure. All right, Kelly Wiley, thank you for being here. Thank you all for joining us again. We will be back next Friday morning for another edition of Inside the Investigations. Until then, take care.